Welcome to Two Small Biz Guys with Zen Benefiel and
Ray Silverstein.
And tonight's guest, we're going to be speaking with Ray Schey, who's now the publisher for the Phoenix Business Journal. And welcome, Ray.
Thanks so much, gentlemen.
Hey, we are really glad to have you here for one thing. And you've been kind of bouncing back and forth from one area to another. You were in radio yourself for quite a while and then switched to print. So What happened there?
Well, most of my career was spent in radio and then television, advertising, and sales and sales management. And then through changes in broadcast, had an opportunity to begin at the Business Journal in Rochester, New York, where I'm from originally. And
you're in New York, huh?
Yeah, upstate New York.
Yeah,
you got tired of all the snow in Rochester.
Yeah, so I went to Milwaukee and froze for part of a year there. And
so would you rather have snow or freeze?
Boy, yeah, the two different, certainly cold
Ski
climates.
Or skate?
But,
Which?
I'd probably take the snow. Really, it was really cold in Milwaukee the winter that I was there. So but now of course I've landed in a perfect place here.
Oh, so welcome.
It never gets cold here.
You're up.
I am?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm up. Strike one.
Okay.
Now, swing and miss. When you started getting into the journal, how did that come about? What interested you? What did you see that you could bring to the table, so to speak, that helped the journal really take off and have the success that you've been able to muster?
Well, first I joined American City Business Journals that owns the Phoenix Business Journal in April of 2013, and was in Milwaukee with that publication for a year as the advertising director, and then within just less than a year had an opportunity to come out here as a publisher. And what I think that I bring that my predecessor, different backgrounds, certainly you see things differently, and
sure,
he certainly did a great job for a number of years, but my perspective from an advertising, sales, and sales management viewpoint was really something that nobody here, or at least within the Business Journal here, had been a part of. So, bringing ideas that had worked well in my other markets that I'd, worked at in sales and sales management certainly were very much a plus. And creating new events here, I have a strong interest in developing new events, seeing and hearing what the business community is interested in, such as international business events, which was, I recognize that being a great opportunity for us coming, in my moving here, with the relationship with Canada, certainly, and the influence that the Canadian business and Canadians in general have had on this market, as well as the opportunities that existed in Mexico.
Yeah, we have a lot of them here during this time of year.
Especially now.
Right.
Especially now. But you mentioned before we went on the air that you've noticed some things different here than what you were expecting.
Yeah.
What were you really expecting? What did you see different?
Well, there's, first of all, the population here is so diverse, and just the population in general is so vast, but, there's a lot of companies that have a small presence here, but compared to, many other markets, and, our company, we operate 40 publications in other markets around the country, and, some of those markets have far more Fortune 500 companies and Fortune 500 presence than what we have here. And this being a more transient area, we don't see as much of that, significant population of employers that we see in some of our other markets, some of our other larger markets. Especially.
Well, I think Phoenix also is kind of indicative of this trend that, you've got 28 million businesses basically in America, and 22 million of them have one employee.
Right.
And, Phoenix is no different. There's 1 to 3 in most of the small businesses here.
Right. And, and even small business companies and even, firms, you could, look at accounting firms, for example, that might have a relatively small presence here just to service either an office of another company that might be headquartered elsewhere, but they just want to have some presence here in the market to be able to, maintain their greater relationship they have with a more national company.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting if you go through your book of lists and you mention accountants or CPAs, and you take a look at like the 5th or 6th biggest firm or 8th biggest firm, and you compare that to Chicago.
Right.
And I look and I say, my God, it's the 8th biggest firm here, and they wouldn't even be in the top 100 in Chicago.
No, you're exactly right, and that's my point.
So it's really the aspect that it's more of a smaller business community than it is the bigger cities.
No question about it, too. A couple of other things that really surprised me was, especially moving from different regions of the country. I lived in the Northeast, I lived in the Southeast, I've lived in the Midwest, and, now coming out here about a year and a half ago, the influence of Canada on this region, in particular, the acquisition of residential real estate in 2009, 2008, 2010, even for that matter, that really saved this region from further decline and further challenges with regards to the economy too, and then recognizing the opportunities that do exist still between the U.S. and Canada, and being able to keep open doors for businesses coming in from Canada that want to have many that I've learned that want to have a stopping off point to Mexico. There's a lot of Canadian businesses operating in Mexico now too, and so this region, the climate, a stopping off point for people that are doing business in Mexico. It makes sense for them too.
And that route's going to get even bigger once the highway's complete.
Exactly.
Yeah. You mentioned that you were involved in these bigger cities, and you came here, and you see that there's a transition from the impact of real estate and, say, vacation. I mean, this has basically been a resort type and real estate market driven. Do you see other activity which is really picking up and taking up some of that slack?
Yeah, and that's really been a benefit to the region economically, is to see more diversification, seeing other businesses that are starting to trend, and the startups in the technology and medical technology and biotech and biosciences, and that's really creating that saving us from having just being the one trick pony is
and one of your recent feature articles was about I think it was Scottsdale being one of the best places in the country for startups
exactly.
now.
And
that SkySong has a lot to do with that.
Right. Yeah. ASU, and my column in last week's paper too talks about some of the things I'd like to see in the year ahead too, and one is the continued growth of ASU, obviously, and people look at the institution growing. It's helping the area with regards to the number of students, but what comes along with that is professors moving in from other parts of the country,
right,
from well-established universities that are coming here and choosing to be a part of what the growth is at ASU. And
now, do you see business and education trending, the bridge between the two being an ongoing trend, or something that's even growing to a further
just
reach?
If nothing else, the construction of some of the buildings and the for not just ASU but University of Arizona too, and what's happening downtown and in and around the Cronkite School,
and also Grand Canyon
Grand Canyon.
Right.
No, I mentioned Brian Mueller too. So we're really fortunate to have two extremely bright and energetic and passionate university presidents here between Michael Crow and Brian Mueller too. So that really we don't have the number of colleges and universities that you find, and you use the example of Chicago or other big cities like that too. But the ones that we have here are really growing and seeing and making a tremendous impact.
And speaking of trending, also, do you notice that there's a lot of co-working and incubator space development in that respect beyond the educational realms, just in like SeedSpot?
Yeah. Oh, SkySong is a great example of what's happening too with the startups too, but beyond that too. But what we could use to further that is to see more seed money, more venture capital money, more angel investing too. That would certainly help to continue the growth and bring some of that, taking some of that talent pool that we have available here and that's coming out of the colleges and universities from those students that might have moved here from a different part of the country and really decide that they like it here and they want to stay here. Giving them the opportunity to get a little funding behind them and being
not
able
too many
to
other places in the country that you could live that have such wonderful weather most of the year.
I agree.
That's a heavy attractor.
You mentioned the source of money. We had Rick Murray who was talking about crowdfunding. Mm-hmm. But is there a lot of entrepreneurial money for startups here?
Not as much as we wish, and there's been more of an influx.
I wish there were more too. But.
Right. It would help you too, Ray. There's there's been money that's been coming in more so from Texas and even California too. From what I've learned in the time that I've been here, as I mentioned, just over a year and a half, that's helping some of those startups and some of those companies really get started too. It would be nice because there's certainly a lot of money in the Valley. We all know and recognize that. But and I think some of it is a result of what happened during the recession, that some of those people might be a little more reluctant to get in the game.
Have you seen any activity from the crowdfunding that was passed in the legislation where there's any momentum to do that, or?
Not that I can say specifically. I'm sure that some of my reporters have probably, connected with some of those companies and seen some of that activity too, but none that I can, that I can honestly say that I'm comfortably speaking about.
Okay, I was just kind of curious because it seemed to be such a momentum in Arizona to have that program.
It really is. It's given, nationally, it's given companies an opportunity to get a start that they never would have had that just by going to one or two or three sources.
So what we need to do is get a crowd and ask each one for $1, and we're all set.
Yeah. What's your idea, Ray? What are you going to do?
And it's a lot like the print to digital transition, where there's a heavy influx in this new kind of funding and networking and information that is available through the digital realm.
Right.
And speaking of that, then I think we're going to take a short break here, and we'll be right back to continue this discussion with Ray Schey. Say, I have Roy.
Oh, you're
hey,
allowed
Roy.
You're allowed one ear.
Yeah.
You got two Rays here. We're trying to make it easy for you.
Yeah, Ray, Roy, Johnson, who We'll be back in just a minute. And welcome back to Two Small Biz Guys with Ray Squared and Zen. And he doesn't have to call me Johnson.
See, when I went to college, it was an engineering school, and that would be appropriate, Ray Square, Ray to the second power.
Yeah, well, we got two of them here this evening, and both of them very intelligent and connected. So, Ray, you guys were talking on the break about some serious things that are going on between the United States and Mexico, and how you're seeing that develop.
Right.
I think we could kind of segue into that again.
Yeah, one of I've had the pleasure of being involved in a lot of really great projects and promotions and events and things too in my career in both radio and television, and now in the publishing world and in the business publishing world. And one of the things
always nice to have your finger on the pulse.
And the perfect example to that is the event that we created where we brought Carlos Slim, one of the world's wealthiest individuals, to Phoenix last April. That was the first of our Global Markets Discovery Series, and that particular event focused on Mexico and doing business in Mexico. So we put together two panels that had people who were either doing business in Mexico or invested in business in Mexico. That was very, very informative for people who might be looking to explore some of those opportunities. And Carlos Slim, of course, was the keynote speaker and drew, an incredibly large number of people. We only had about 22 days to put that event together from start to finish. But it also gave Governor Doug Ducey the opportunity to meet.
That's a pretty slim time frame.
It was not enough time, but nonetheless, we put 525 people in the room to hear Carlos Slim speak and the two panels that followed. But, maybe more importantly, at least for our region here and for the state of Arizona, Governor Doug Ducey met Carlos Slim for the first time, in one of the back rooms at the Sheraton before the event started. And so that was really something that kind of initiated and started what began a strong initiative on the part of Governor Doug Ducey, who was subsequently invited to travel to Mexico, spend some time with Carlos Slim as his guest down there. He brought a contingent of business leaders to Mexico City too. And so now we've kind of seen a turn in the relationship between Arizona and Mexico.
And oftentimes those backroom conversations or those off-camera or off-stage conversations.
No, only mañana.
Mañana?
Only mañana. But when you see this activity with international business, do you really see where the community is getting behind it, other than the political aspect?
No question. And for that event in particular, the Latino community that really came out in strong support too, and just, sometimes, at least within more of our mainstream media, we don't realize the importance and the strength of the Latino community and the Latino business community too. So the Hispanic Chamber here was our partner, one of our partners in that event too, and they really supported the event pretty extensively too, and they're doing some great things within their within the Hispanic community, and they've become a good partner of ours, and we've looked to explore more opportunities because I think in many respects it's kind of been overlooked, some of the opportunities that do exist there. So now with the governor focusing on there, Mayor Stanton is doing a great job in building the relationship to offices that are opening here and in Mexico City to kind of mend some of those fences over the years, and so now it's really presented a great opportunity for a lot of businesses to be successful, in Arizona as well as Mexico, and
it's great to see that community being developed. It traditionally has been a very underdeveloped community. I know back in the early aughts, I was with Self-Employment Loan Fund, which was a microlending organization here in Phoenix, and we serviced women and minority-owned businesses, and accordingly, the ratio of Hispanic businesses or Latino businesses was huge. Mm-hmm. And we helped hundreds of people get started and with microloans, which were $500 to $1,000. And now some of those companies are, hundreds of thousands and millions in revenue just because they had the opportunity to begin that with people who at least believed in them initially to help them get a foot up,
right,
or a leg up, or an arm up, or certainly heads up.
Some of the research, obviously as the Hispanic population has increased in this area, and they feel more accepted, and the opportunities for them doing business in the state increase. The research that's showing up is just really staggering too, with the amount of money that they represent and can bring to the table, the loyalty factor to products and services too. So, and then, beyond Mexico, the event that we held about a month or so ago focused on Canada. We partnered with the Arizona Commerce Authority for this Global Markets Discovery Series. So the first featured Mexico with Carlos Slim coming in last April. Then more recently focused on Canada. We brought a speaker in from Toronto who worked for one of the major banks in Canada and previously worked for the Toronto Globe and Mail, the daily publication there, as an editor. So he's very familiar with a lot of topics in Canada and in the relationship with the U.S. And so our next event will focus on Asia. So again, we want to bring some of these ideas and opportunities to the business community to, if they're thinking, gosh, maybe I'd like to explore opening a business, in Asia or in Canada or Mexico. Those are some of the topics that
and so these are some of the things that you're bringing with you that, as the new publisher, which weren't really there or were there in less.
Correct.
Since you're mentioning all this international activity, what has been the relationship with Thunderbird, which is now, I understand, part of ASU,
right,
which was considered one of the foremost schools of international activity or business activity?
Yeah, and the loyalty factor from those alumni too is exceptionally strong. I've met with Alan Morrison several months ago too, and I know that he was someone that Dr. Crow brought in to run Thunderbird. So we've established a relationship with them. We've talked to them about different partnership opportunities, some of which are still to be developed, but they're definitely so well recognized worldwide.
So does that help? Does that help in the fostering the transactions or making introductions, or does that bring a unique position to the say Maricopa County or Arizona to the worldwide market?
It does, and we've talked to them about looking at some speakers that they might be able to bring in from Thunderbird alum that might be living overseas somewhere that can be one of our speakers or one of our panelists to share some of what their experiences were in transitioning to one of the global markets too.
So how does the Business Digest, since you've got 40 other publications or 39 others, but actually this is the only one that really counts, the Phoenix Business Journal, how does all these publications, do they help on the international type of activity, or is there a cross-pollination of concepts and ideas?
Well, yeah, we we share best practices on a regular basis too. We meet, different times throughout the year as publishers or advertising directors or editors, and share some of our ideas. And every one of our publications receives every one of our other markets papers every week to be able to look to see what they might be doing, if there's special sections in the paper. North Carolina just created, and this was something that I had would be an extension of the events that we've done, the international business events, is to create a special publication or a special section that would be inserted into our paper on how to do business in these global markets too. So it could be kind of a step-by-step, on how to establish business in Mexico, or how to, do business in Canada, and, throughout the world.
We're going to be breaking pretty soon, but I'd like to have you think about how small business can participate in the international market. Because I know a lot of small business people are very reluctant because of the unknown factor of international trade, letters of credit, how to finance, and all those type of activities. So,
okay.
And with the internet and the global market being available, that's a huge opportunity that can be developed that can really...
Well, the other aspect is with the internet, you can be very small but also look very big.
Right. It's all about presentation. And speaking of presentation, we're going to bow out for a moment, and we'll be right back. Thanks for listening. And welcome back to Two Small Biz Guys with Zen and Ray Squared. And one of those Rays had some interesting questions while we were on the break. So, Ray, why don't you pick it up from there? And let's...
This is Ray to Ray, mano to mano. So, before we took
Rays of light.
Rays of light, that's right. That's why I say ray of hope.
Right.
So before we took the break, I was asking, you mentioned international business, and what is the participation, or how does small business get involved in this type of activity?
Yeah, well, I mean, the Internet's made doing business internationally, at least the research side of things, far easier and far more attainable for small business owners than it ever was before. First and foremost, probably most lawyers would probably tell you just to have someone that can kind of coach you through that. But, even I think the first step prior to, looking to partner with or looking to hire a law firm that can help you to establish yourself in those other countries, because there's a lot of scams out there too, as we know. But first and foremost, it's really...
Get emails every day.
Yeah. First and foremost, just to understand the culture and where you're going to do business. And, that's one of the things that a lot of people who have explored the option or the opportunities in doing business in Mexico is you kind of have to do it at the pace of what the Mexicans and
sure. Well, anytime you have a culture that you're used to, or you go out of the country, we often don't pay attention to the culture that we go into.
Exactly.
And behaving like it does, right. Because if you're going to look for results, you have to, when in Rome, do as the Romans. And we've often not really paid attention to that. I know as we started developing businesses overseas, that first round that happened for almost a decade had almost an 80% failure rate because of that very factor. They didn't think ahead.
Well, and especially as Americans, we take the lead in the world on many things, but
you don't do it our way.
We're not always well received, and people
right.
kind of look at us in that respect too. That we think we can come in and change things or do things our way, but we have to be respectful to them of what their traditions are, what their culture
Absolutely.
is.
The more respect you give to another, the more respect you'll get.
Well, but there is one major benefit here, because like when you're in the Midwest, for example, the states next to you speak English. So you're in an English environment. And down here you can be at least in a multilingual language.
I'd say that 3 times.
So it makes you think a little bit differently. And over in Europe, you're not that far from France to Germany to Luxembourg or Belgium. So therefore you now have a truly international thought process, where here we don't have
most people speak at least 2 or 3 languages there.
Well, but it's not the aspect of speaking the language. I mean, that helps, but I think it's the aspect that you're so close to other firms, you have to think international. You have to think export. And here the market's so big, small business owners don't like to think export because it's unique and different. When I had my
And
business
it creates
years
change,
ago,
and nobody likes change.
when I had my business years ago, we used to do export to about 26 different countries, but it was a learning process to do it.
Right. Yeah, with each country, each culture has a different way of doing things, or and their acceptance of you or lack thereof can make a huge difference in your.
So with that and your development of the international market and the articles and things that you put in the paper itself, how are you addressing that, or is this something that you're looking at an ongoing development?
Yeah, we'll continue to explore other markets. One of the other markets that we see starting to emerge is now that people are traveling to, and we've kind of moved in a different direction with our relationship with Cuba, is another market that people see as a business opportunity too. Beyond the events themselves, our next step is to publish a special section in our paper that will be distributed to all of our subscribers that will kind of give people some direction on how to do business internationally too. Kind of like a step-by-step. Here's step one is to identify a law firm that's established or has an office in one of those markets or one of those countries that you're looking to do business in, and so kind of take people through the process.
So would you develop your relationships with, like say, Thunderbird and people who have been doing business with those countries to develop the articles and
even with the state?
This really creates a great community collaboration in that respect.
Mm-hmm. And, each of those companies, or in the case of Thunderbird, schools will have opportunities to be able to maybe contribute content that will be able to make this a little more robust and a little more substantial, as well as, and let's face it, to place ads to talk about what they might offer. So the law firms that are established in Central America and Mexico, can place an ad to talk about their own virtues and their successes in doing business internationally, accounting firms, and so there's professional services that are out there that are available to people too, and so if they want to be in that realm, that they have the opportunity to place ads in that too.
Okay, when you put those programs together, where you brought parties in, or you're putting the special publication out, are there state agencies that assist in the export activity, or what to do? And
that's what's going to help us with the content, because those organizations or those state agencies, have a vested interest in the growth of international business too, and so they're more than willing to provide great content to be able to, for us to kind of take that content and repurpose.
So you're kind of like me. You're a possibilities coagulator by bringing all of those elements together. Right?
Knowing where to go to get the answers and the content to be able to provide.
When you say a coagulator, I keep on thinking bleeding.
No.
So are you too blue or something like that?
I'm very blue. I'm so blue. It's and I miss you. I'm glad you're back. In the development of that, though, there's all kinds of factors that are very nebulous to most business owners, and this is where you begin to bring all of those things together and create a solid foundation.
Exactly. And, I see it as, in addition to it being published in the paper, we would also have copies available for someone who, if they saw it, they would be able to, purchase just the issue, that special section, as well. Or just share with other people that they might know if that may not be a subscriber to. Sure.
Too, because once you've got it done, it's done and available. And
it has a longer shelf life too, because some of that
absolutely
is change.
Now, we were talking about community. Let's go into a little different direction with community. I know community service and those the development of service opportunities in the community is something that's been important for you along the line too. How do you see the Business Journal developing that with you at the reins?
Mm-hmm. Well, we continue to receive numerous requests to offer some kind of in-kind support from various nonprofit organizations, charitable organizations too. So we help them with any opportunities.
What's the best fit for you? You find? Or have you yet?
Well, for me personally, I think it's education. I think that's really, one of the areas that we need to focus more of our attention with, and for me personally, that's an area that I'd like to see.
That's really broad.
Yeah. Well,
are there any I was in it. I taught school for a while too, and I had full charge of several charter schools curriculums. So there's a lot that's involved with that. Are there specific areas that you feel that are more important than others?
I think probably the one that's most important really is literacy, and that's being able to, encourage younger students to be able to, to read.
Carry on a conversation.
Yeah.
No, to read the Phoenix Business Journal.
Right.
That's right.
I can understand that.
You might have to start out with something smaller than the business
Well, we've
journal
gone from 8th grade level to 5th grade level now, correct? As far as a reading level. And if we're going to move ahead as a country, it would seem like we need to bring that up. And I don't know if there's apathy or, some hidden potential in those that are behind the scenes that are, that are planning to do something for the future that brings that up. It's something that's going to be necessary if we're going to continue to compete in a world market.
One of the boards that I just joined about 3 or 4 months ago is Patrick Peterson's foundation from the Arizona Cardinals, and that's one of his
Go Cardinals.
That's one of his focuses is addressing literacy. So what he's doing is he's reaching out to some of the schools that need more assistance than others, and putting basically a small library in there called Patrick's Corner. So it's steps like that by him going in and being part of that and reading to some of the students in some of those schools that are more underserved is that I think, and that's part of what my interest was in getting involved with him and his board too, is being able to kind of help him to through fundraising, which he's also establishing
it takes
the foundation.
a community to raise a child. You got to figure out how to build that community.
Right. But he's, personally contributed, a substantial amount of money to begin the foundation that also has matching funds from the NFL because he put some of his own, money into the foundation too. So, that's a great example, and he's, I think a great inspiration and a great example to a lot of young people too, by, trying to teach them to read, and, again, just by what he's doing, and certainly his performance on the field gives him more notoriety and makes him a good example, a good role model to a lot of students. So
part of that, it's been an ongoing process to create good news in the community, not just from a business growth standpoint, but from a business service and community organization and development and service. Are these things that are ongoing in development with the journal, or do you see these things expanding to create a better readership or more interest?
Well, we're not just the Phoenix Business Journal, but our other 39 publications across the country are all committed to, doing more than our share to be able to support the communities in which we all, live and work too. So, we'll continue to evaluate the opportunities that come our way or the requests that come our way to support various events and various, charitable organizations.
Now this is something that may sound like it comes out of the blue, but are you familiar with the ISO 26000 social responsibility standards?
No.
You're familiar with the ISO group?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So there's a new set of standards that came out in 2010. Took them about 10 years, 90 representatives from that many countries, and they came together with a document, and it's not necessarily like the ISO 9000 certifiable standards that the manufacturing industry uses. It's an intentional one. But many of these things that you're talking about how the companies and the organizations and industry begins to look at the community and helping it to rebuild as well. And it's more of an intentional participation as opposed to a standardized or certifiable. Speaking of certifiable, we'll be right back with you with Two Small Biz Guys after this break. And welcome back to Two Small Biz Guys. We're going to be finishing up this show with Ray Schey, and the publisher of the Phoenix Business Journal. And let's start this last section out with talking about how business compares to what it used to be, what it's like now, and where it's going to go.
Yeah. Well, certainly the last 6 or 8 years here have been pretty volatile, and what I'm seeing is that the growth has been very, very steady, and I think for this region, there's nothing wrong with that. And I've written about it a little bit in the paper and spoken about it at some of our events. That some of that slow, calculated growth is probably better for this area than those quick jumps, and especially one that's not predicated on the success in real estate. So by seeing growth in the technology sector and healthcare and education, gives us a better balance. And
I've heard something like the slow and steady wins the race. And that old adage just really seems to apply, and it really creates a solid foundation for growth.
And we're looking at other markets around the country, Northern California in particular, that's seen this, just tremendous growth. And frankly,
the .com, the boom and bust.
And even some of what's going on up there now too, with a lot of technology. But now we're finding more, we're seeing our own growth in some of those areas too. But we certainly have real estate, and just looking around and seeing the number of projects and the number of the amount of construction activity in every corner of the valley here too is very encouraging. But aside from what we're seeing with apartments and home building and so on, what's really encouraging is the technology and healthcare and education growth too. That's going to give us that more balanced attack as we continue to grow.
Well, and we have to do that, especially with the healthcare, because there's going to be more, as the boomers get older, that population is going to be more than the youngsters coming up.
Right.
Yeah, your memo today said until 2030, you expect people over 65 are going to be more than 50% of the population, right, or between people 16 to 30.
Right.
So healthcare will be a very big issue.
And we have some of the greatest examples of healthcare growth and opportunity here between Phoenix Children's Hospital with the growth that their development and continued growth of a new facility there, and the Mayo Clinic, obviously, Cancer Treatment Centers of America, so those three institutions alone, and not to mention what the hospitals, what Banner's doing in Abrazo, those are all continuing to drive the economy with some of their growth, whether it's building new facilities or hiring doctors to come move to the area from outside. So all of that's is
and winter visitors, oftentimes once they reach certain ages, they decide to stay.
Yeah, it's a pretty good area. Yeah.
Well, but all that construction or all those growth in that industry creates the support mechanism for them with smaller businesses, smaller distribution. So it's a multiplying effect with the people. You create the bigger one, and then you have the smaller businesses to fill in the basic needs.
Right. Yeah, the small business growth is, something that we're all anxious to see, the continued, success of small business owners too, because they're really going to be the driver of our future too.
So what do you think the future lies for this area?
I think people are going to continue to move to this area. You just use the examples of some of the great sporting events over a 3-year period between, the Super Bowl and the Pro Bowl last year, the college football championship coming up next week, a week from tonight, next year the Final Four, bringing all those visitors to the area. And to Zen's point, the more people we're introducing to this area, whether it's watching our area on television, seeing what we have here to offer, or people coming here for the first time, or, another really good example that I've seen is we're starting to plan our events for 2016. We're finding more of the hotels and the resorts that are, hosting conferences here. The conference business is coming back in a really strong manner too, and that's bringing more people to the area, driving more revenue, more tax revenue for our state. So all of those things combined are going to lead to our continued growth, both in some of the sectors and some of the vertical industries that I mentioned, but just more people moving to the area too. So certainly planning for the future with some of the apartment complexes that are being built all over the valley.
And we're staying ahead a little bit more with the transportation now too.
No question.
Where 30 years ago they didn't have the build out that they do now, and they kind of got behind the 8 ball for a little while and then got caught up, and now they're looking a little more ahead with the widening of the roads and creation of the new ones too, even though there are some disagreements amongst the residents.
Yeah, I think our infrastructure is really strong. The planning to be able to take, the 101 over there in the East Valley and not waiting until it becomes a bigger problem, but actually, adding a lane in each direction too, to be able to accommodate future growth over in that side. The light rail too. Mayor Stanton's got the right ideas there. So that's all helping. I've taken the light rail personally, and I think it really provides an excellent opportunity or an excellent alternative to driving your car into downtown.
It does. I've
and
taken it as
then
well.
Of course, when you have these major events going on, which again next weekend with a lot of the weekend activities for the college football championship, it gives people the opportunity to be able to take the light rail in to be able to come to downtown and not have to worry about where am I going to park or what am I going to do.
Do you
a lot of times that keeps people from going to downtown areas. The uncertainty of where do I go once I get down there. There's one-way streets. There's parking garage. How do I deal with all of that? So.
Right.
Do you see more of a downtown growth?
No. Oh yeah. There's and more of the the baby boomers want to move downtown. I've talked to other business folks too that as their children have grown and move out of the house, they want to come downtown, and there's far more to offer. And even before I moved here, I understand, even cityscape is something that's still relatively new here, which I have a hard time trying to picture downtown without a cityscape. But, cityscape is one great example of that downtown growth. And, I again wrote in my column last Friday too, that I know that they're working very closely to get a downtown supermarket, to make it easier. That's the one thing that really lacks. There's entertainment.
I remember years ago there was
and,
the park with an amphitheater and a parking lot across the street, and now that's all built up.
Yeah. Well, and more hotels being built too. The Hilton Garden Inn just opened up right on Monroe, and Central. The Courtyard and the Marriott being a brand new hotel being built just a couple blocks south of there on Central. So that's really a good indicator too. Our hotels and resorts are continuing to grow and seeing more activity for convention and conference business too.
So you see good things.
No question about it. That's why I came here.
What is your expectation of the high-tech area?
Again, the brain power that's coming out of the colleges and universities here between, ASU and U of A and the medical school too with U of A. You're going to see more high-tech, Dr. Crow's committed to growing the Fulton School of Engineering. So the more engineers we have coming out of school here that, are going to want to stay in the area, I think that's just going to continue to lead us to great things in the future. So I'm extremely optimistic about the future here in the Valley.
Do you see a entrepreneurial attitude of young people in the Valley?
Oh yeah. And again, if they have access to the funding, that's going to keep them or give them the opportunity to stay here and do what they want to do and kind of follow their vision and follow their dreams too.
So you are really rosy. Well, maybe that's a wrong thing, but in this valley we get the point. So
yeah, no, the people I speak to, and obviously from many different size companies and many different business industries too, are all very encouraged. And again, just going back to the slow growth that we're seeing, everybody seems to be okay with that as long as we can see that trajectory pointing upwards. And everybody seems to be expecting great things. 16, especially a lot of the contractors too, and commercial real estate folks, they see 16 as being a good year, and then 2017, really taking us to the next level.
Well, Ray, we really appreciate your time and space here and your words of wisdom and how the Journal is actually chronicling all of this development and growth and making it available to the residents of the Valley, small business owners, and even the corporations.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, we appreciate your words of wisdom and insight.
We'll see you again soon.
Sounds great.